The knife slipped, and Jenna Russo drew blood. It was a clean cut across the pad of her left thumb, shallow but bright enough that 3 drops fell onto the white cutting board before she could jerk her hand away. She hissed through her teeth, wrapped her thumb in a towel, and stared at the red blooming through the cotton as if it belonged to someone else. In 11 years of professional cooking, Jenna could count her serious mistakes on one hand. Burns happened. A nick from a mandoline happened. Steam happened when a kitchen was moving too fast, and 30 plates were waiting at the pass. But she did not lose control of a knife. Not anymore. Not since she was 22 and still working the fish station at a hotel downtown, when an executive chef twice her age had told her she would never survive fine dining if she let fear live in her hands. Jenna had spent the next decade teaching her hands not to fear anything. Yet tonight, in a private mansion on the North Shore, with 40 guests arriving in less than an hour, and 6 members of her catering team moving around her like a machine, the old tremor had returned. It had returned because of one name, Vitale. She had seen it engraved into the serving silver 10 minutes earlier, a narrow V inside an ornate crest, and something deep in her body had gone cold before her mind could explain why. She had told herself it meant nothing. Chicago was full of Italians. Half the suburbs had Vitales, Morettis, Bellinis, Rossis, Russos. She had signed the contract 3 weeks ago because the deposit was ridiculous, enough to cover 2 months of payroll at her restaurant and put real money toward the second location she had been negotiating for since spring. The event planner had called it a private family gala, old money. 20 courses of past food reduced to 7 elegant ones. No media, no photographs. Discretion required. Jenna had dealt with wealthy clients before. Wealth had its own kind of theater, and she knew how to survive it. You smiled when they changed the guest count at the last minute. You ignored the woman who asked if truffle oil was vegan. You pretended the man complaining about imported mineral water had not arrived in a car worth more than your first restaurant. You cooked. You got paid. You left. That was supposed to be tonight, but the house had unsettled her from the moment she arrived. The wrought iron gate opened only after 2 men in black coats inspected her van. Security cameras tracked the driveway. The mansion itself sat above the lake like something built to outlive everyone who entered it. Limestone walls pale beneath the October moon. Windows glowing gold, dark water glittering beyond the grounds. Men in tailored suits stood at doors where normal houses would have had decorative lamps. They did not look like caterers, valets, or event staff. They looked like men who had been hired because they knew how to use their hands for purposes unrelated to hospitality. Jenna had noticed. Of course she had. She had also noticed the name on the contract. Vitale Holdings. She should have asked more questions. She had not. Because she was 32 years old, Chef Jenna Russo, owner of Russo Table, James Beard semi-finalist, employer of 23 people, and a woman who had spent too many years making herself smaller to give old ghosts the satisfaction of frightening her again. She pressed the towel harder against her thumb. "Chef?" Denise called from the stove. "You good?" Jenna looked up. Denise Parker, her sous chef, stood over a copper pan with one eyebrow raised. She had worked with Jenna for 4 years and possessed the irritating ability to distinguish between Jenna being angry, nervous, hungry, insulted, overwhelmed, or simply in need of coffee from the way she held a spoon. "Fine," Jenna said. "You're bleeding. Observant. That's why I pay you." Denise looked toward the bandaged thumb. "Want me to take fish? You touch my scallops and I'll fire you." There she is. Denise turned back to the stove. Jenna exhaled slowly, rinsed the cut, applied a proper kitchen bandage, pulled on a fresh glove, and reached for another knife. She had just begun slicing blood oranges when the kitchen door opened. She did not look immediately. One of the house staff had been drifting in and out all evening, checking timing, adjusting wine service, carrying instructions from upstairs. Jenna kept slicing. The room changed anyway. It was subtle. Conversations stopped halfway through sentences. One of the younger cooks straightened instinctively. Denise glanced over Jenna's shoulder and went very still. Then Jenna heard a man say, "Everything on schedule?" The knife stopped. Not because she consciously recognized the voice. 10 years had changed it. It was lower now, roughened at the edges, stripped of the careless confidence of adolescence. But some voices live in the body before they live in memory. Jenna's fingers tightened around the knife handle. Slowly, she turned. Marco Vitale stood 3 feet inside the kitchen. For a second, neither of them moved. 10 years collapsed so violently that Jenna almost felt dizzy. The boy she remembered had been 16, lean, beautiful. In the effortless way, certain boys were beautiful before life had done anything to deserve or damage them. Dark hair that refused to stay neat. Expensive school blazer. A smile everyone wanted turned toward them. A group of boys always nearby, laughing too loudly at whatever he said because Marco Vitale had been the kind of teenager around whom social gravity formed naturally. The man in front of her bore that boy's face in harsher architecture. He had broader shoulders now, filling a charcoal suit that had certainly cost more than some cars. His hair was shorter, his jaw was harder. A pale scar cut through his left eyebrow and disappeared into his temple. There was no laughter in him, no easy arrogance. There was something colder where those things had been, something controlled and practiced, the expression of a man who had spent years teaching the world not to surprise him. But Jenna surprised him. She watched it happen. Marco's entire body stopped. The man behind him, large, shaved head, dark jacket, nearly walked into his back. Marco stared at Jenna as though he had entered the wrong room and found a dead person standing beside the stove. Color drained from his face. One hand came up and caught the edge of the doorframe. "Jenna," he said. Her name landed harder than it should have. Not a question, not confusion, recognition. Jenna felt 15 again for exactly half a heartbeat. She smelled industrial bathroom soap, heard girls laughing outside a stall, saw a folded sheet of notebook paper moving from hand to hand down a cafeteria table. Then she buried it. "Chef Russo," she corrected. Her voice did not shake. She would be proud of that later. Marco flinched. Barely. But she saw it. "Chef Russo," he repeated. Jenna turned back to the cutting board. "Your first course goes out in 22 minutes. If you're here to change the timing, tell your event planner, not my kitchen." Silence. Then Marco said, "No change. Good." Another beat. "Is there anything else?" He could have answered 100 ways. Teenage Marco would have. He had always possessed a joke when silence threatened him. Adult Marco simply said, "No." Jenna sliced through the blood orange. "Then you're blocking my door." His bodyguard's eyebrows rose. Denise made a suspicious coughing sound that might have been a laugh. Marco stepped aside immediately. "Of course." Jenna did not look back as he left. She did not need to. Her body knew exactly when the door closed behind him. Only then did her hand begin trembling again. "Okay," Denise said carefully. "That was not nothing. Scallops, chef." "Denise, you looked like you wanted to stab the host with a citrus knife." Jenna changed knives. "Would have been embarrassing. Wrong blade." Denise stared at her another second, then returned to the stove. Jenna breathed through her nose and focused on the plate in front of her. Seared scallop, brown butter, blood orange, fennel pollen, microgreens. Food had saved her before. It gave the hands somewhere to go when the mind became dangerous. So she cooked. She plated 38 scallops with mechanical precision, while the past tried to pull open every locked door inside her. The first memory came without permission. Sophomore year, cafeteria. Jenna, 15 years old and already accustomed to calculating where she could sit without drawing attention to herself. That was the trick when you were the fat girl in a school full of money, thinness, and casual cruelty. You learned geography. Which tables had enough space between chairs? Which hallways had boys who barked when you passed? Which bathrooms were least likely to have girls discussing diets in front of mirrors? Which classrooms had desks with attached chairs that squeezed against your hips and turned every lesson into a 45-minute reminder that your body had been constructed incorrectly? Marco had known her since 7th grade. Before he became cruel, he had sometimes been kind. That was the part Jenna hated remembering most. Once, in 8th grade science, he had partnered with her voluntarily when no one else did. Once he had laughed so hard at something she whispered during an assembly that a teacher separated them. Once he had stolen half her fries and said hers tasted better, even though they came from the same cafeteria fryer. She had liked him. Of course she had. Almost everyone liked Marco Vitale. He had made liking him feel effortless. Then, sometime during freshman year, something changed. Marco acquired older friends. started arriving at school in black town cars. His father began appearing at events accompanied by men who never smiled. Marco learned that cruelty could be currency. He spent it generously. The worst day happened in October. Jenna remembered because the cafeteria windows had been fogged with rain. She had lowered herself carefully into a chair, and Marco, sitting 2 tables away, said loudly, "Easy, Russo. School budget can't afford another one." Several boys laughed. Jenna pretended not to hear. That might have been survivable. Then someone said, "Marco, draw it." Marco had always been good at drawing. 5 minutes later, a sheet of paper began moving through the room. Hand to hand, snickers followed it. Jenna knew before it reached her. She always knew. People believed humiliation arrived suddenly. It did not. It had weather. Pressure changed. Smiles appeared where they should not. People avoided your eyes because they were enjoying something at your expense, and wanted to enjoy your reaction too. The paper finally reached her. On it, Marco had drawn a grotesque cartoon of Jenna, crushing a cafeteria chair, surrounded by flying food. Above it, in block letters, he had written, "Earthquake warning." She remembered staring at it. Then across the room, Marco looked back at her. For one strange second, Jenna thought he might realize what he had done. She had expected shame. Instead, Marco smiled, so Jenna smiled too. That was the survival instinct nobody talked about. Sometimes the person being humiliated laughed first, so everyone would believe the knife had missed. She forced a sound out of her throat. Someone clapped. Then Jenna got up, walked to the bathroom, locked herself inside the last stall, and cried until the bell rang. She went home and told her mother she had eaten lunch. She did not eat dinner. The next day, she did not eat breakfast. For 2 days, she treated hunger like punishment. On the 3rd night, she stood in the dark kitchen at 2 in the morning, eating cold lasagna directly from the pan, and hating herself so deeply that she could barely swallow. Marco never knew that part. Or maybe he did. She had spent years deciding it did not matter. "Chef." Jenna blinked. Denise stood beside her. "Service." Jenna looked down. 38 plates waited. "Perfect." She nodded. "Send." The kitchen exploded into motion. For the next 2 hours, Jenna managed not to think about Marco because professional kitchens were merciful that way. There was always another problem more urgent than memory. One server dropped 2 plates. A guest suddenly disclosed a shellfish allergy that somehow had not appeared on the event notes. The lamb needed 4 more minutes, and refused to care that the dining room was ready. Jenna moved through it all, with the focused aggression that had made younger cooks both fear and adore her. But between courses, she found herself looking through the round glass window in the kitchen door. Marco sat at the head of a long table beneath chandeliers that looked old enough to have survived wars. Men and women filled both sides. Some wore expensive suits. Some wore dresses without visible labels, because visible labels were for people who needed proof. Conversation flowed around Marco, but he barely participated. His plate went untouched. Twice, Jenna caught him, looking toward the kitchen. Not casually, not the way a host checks service. He watched the door. Watched her. The 3rd time their eyes met through the glass. Marco looked away first. Jenna hated the small satisfaction that gave her. Around 10, while dessert components were being assembled, another man entered the kitchen. He was in his late 50s, maybe early 60s. Silver hair combed neatly back, navy suit, no tie. He moved slowly, with the confidence of someone who assumed space belonged to him before entering it. Unlike Marco, he did not stop at the threshold. He walked straight through Jenna's kitchen. "Chef Russo," he said. Jenna continued spooning mascarpone onto plates. "Kitchen's closed to guests." "I'm not a guest." "Then you're staff, which means grab a towel." Denise turned away quickly. The man smiled. It was not a warm smile. Salvatore De Luca. Jenna had heard the name once that evening from a waiter, underboss. She had dismissed the term as exaggeration until now. Up close, Salvatore carried none of the theatrical menace Jenna associated with gangster movies. No rings, no visible weapon, no gravelly threats. That made him worse. "Beautiful meal," he said. "The boss has excellent taste." His gaze moved over the kitchen, then back to Jenna. "In everything." Jenna set down the spoon. If that sentence is supposed to mean something, You'll need to work harder. Salvatore's smile deepened. I like direct women. I'm devastated. He reached toward a tray and took a small pastry without asking. Jenna watched him bite into it. He chewed thoughtfully. Marco hasn't eaten like this in years. Marco has barely eaten anything tonight. Exactly. Jenna said nothing. Salvatore placed the half-eaten pastry back on the tray. That irritated her more than if he had insulted the food. It was deliberate, a small act of disrespect performed solely because he could. You knew him, he said. Before. Apparently. School? Jenna looked at him. You ask every caterer for childhood history? Only the ones who make my boss forget there are 40 people at his table. Jenna felt something cold crawl beneath her ribs. Whatever you think is happening, you're confused. Am I? Salvatore stepped closer. His voice remained conversational. Marco Vitale has had women. Beautiful women. Smart women. Women from families whose names open embassies and close courtrooms. I have never seen him brace himself against a doorframe because one of them looked at him. Jenna's jaw tightened. Then talk to him about it. I plan to. Salvatore glanced at the plate she was finishing. But I thought I'd speak to you first. Professional courtesy. You're not in my profession. No, mine is more complicated. His smile faded just enough. The last person who mattered too much to a Vitale nearly buried this family. Jenna held his gaze. Is that supposed to scare me? It's supposed to inform you. He leaned one hand against the stainless steel counter. Marco's father believed affection made a man human. He was wrong. It made him predictable. Predictable men die. Jenna's skin prickled. What does that have to do with me? Salvatore studied her for a long moment. Maybe nothing. I hope nothing. Cook your food, collect your check, go home. Don't matter. Everyone sleeps better. He straightened, gave her a pleasant nod, and left. Denise waited until the door closed. Okay, she said. Now I'm officially asking what the hell kind of catering job you booked. Jenna looked at the half-eaten pastry. One paying triple. Triple suddenly feels low. Finish dessert. Jenna. Denise rarely used her first name during service. Jenna looked at her. You know these people? I knew one of them. And? Jenna thought of cafeteria laughter. I wish I hadn't. Service ended just before midnight. The guests disappeared into black cars one by one. Staff began packing equipment. Jenna supervised every crate herself, because anger made her meticulous. By 12:15, the kitchen had been restored to a level of cleanliness that pleased her. The last invoice had been signed, and she carried a case of glassware down the side drive toward the van. The night had turned colder. Wind came off Lake Michigan sharp enough to bite through her chef coat and black wool jacket. Jenna loaded the case, shut the van door, and reached for another crate. You still cut onions too fast. She froze. Marco stood 10 feet away beneath a security light. Alone. No bodyguard. No coat. His suit jacket was buttoned against the cold, but his hair moved in the wind. Jenna turned back to the van. Good night, Mr. Vitale. You did it in home economics, too. Her shoulders tightened. I'm thrilled you remember my knife technique. Mrs. Kowalski used to stand behind you because she thought you'd lose a finger. Was there a reason you followed me outside? Yes. Jenna faced him. Then make it quick. Up close, without the kitchen doorway between them. Marco looked more tired than powerful. There were faint lines beside his eyes, a shadow of stubble along his jaw. The scar through his eyebrow seemed more pronounced under the white security light. His hands hung at his sides, empty. I'm sorry, he said. Jenna stared at him. That's your opening? It's 10 years late. 10? She laughed once, without humor. Try 17. I started being cruel before that day. Glad you kept records. I did. Something in his voice made her stop. Marco looked toward the lake, then back. Every stupid thing I remember. The cafeteria chair, the drawing. That day in chemistry when I told Campbell you'd eaten his missing sandwich even though I knew Danny took it. The winter formal. Jenna's stomach turned. Don't. I remember. Congratulations. It isn't something I'm proud of. You think listing it makes this better? No. Then what exactly are we doing? Marco swallowed. You deserve to know I remember. Jenna stepped closer. Do you know what I remember? His face tightened. Probably more than I do. I remember the bathroom stall. I remember making myself laugh because if I didn't, everyone would know you hurt me. I remember not eating for 2 days because some part of my 15-year-old brain decided hunger was the price I had to pay for having a body people could joke about. I remember standing in front of a mirror and trying to figure out which pieces of myself I had to remove before somebody like you would stop looking embarrassed to be kind to me. Marco's face went white. Jenna felt the old anger surge, hot and clean. So don't stand here and say you remember like memory is punishment enough. I don't think it is. Then what do you think? I think there isn't enough punishment. The answer came too quickly to be performance. Jenna blinked. Marco looked down at the gravel. I was a coward. You were cruel. Both. You liked having people laugh. I liked controlling what they laughed at. He lifted his eyes. There's a difference. Not one that helps me. Jenna folded her arms. Explain. For the first time, Marco hesitated. Real hesitation. My father hated weakness. Not disliked. Hated. He believed anything a man loved became leverage. He taught me that before I understood what leverage meant. And this is where you tell me your daddy made you bully the fat girl? Marco flinched. No. Good. He didn't make me do anything. I did it. His jaw tightened. But you asked why. Jenna said nothing. Marco continued. You laughed at something I said in 8th grade. Do you remember? No, I do. Assembly. Principal Ferris was talking about community responsibility, and I whispered something about him looking like a disappointed turtle. Against her will, Jenna remembered. A tiny flash. Sitting beside Marco in folding chairs, trying not to laugh. Failing. You snorted, Marco said. Loud enough that he heard. I thought it was the funniest sound I'd ever heard. Jenna hated the softness in his voice. Where are you going with this? I liked you. The wind seemed to stop. Jenna stared at him. Marco's face did not change. I liked you before I understood what liking someone could cost in my family. Then my father found a note. What note? I'd written your name. Jenna almost laughed. You expect me to believe this? No. I expect nothing from you. He looked toward the house. He asked who Jenna Russo was. I told him no one. He said good. Then he told me a story about his cousin, who had married outside the family and spent the rest of his life being controlled through his wife. My father said a man who showed people where his heart lived deserved to have a knife put through it. Marco paused. The next week, Danny Bellini asked if I liked you. Jenna's mouth went dry. And you drew the picture? Yes. Because making me miserable was easier than letting your friends think you liked me. Marco closed his eyes briefly. Yes. The admission should have felt satisfying. Instead, Jenna felt sick. That's pathetic. I know. No, you don't get to say that like agreement absolves you. It doesn't. Stop saying the right thing. The anger burst out of her. Do you understand how infuriating this is? I've imagined this conversation 100 times. In half of them, you don't remember me. In the other half, you tell me I was too sensitive, or that we were kids, or that you were joking. I had speeches for those versions of you. I knew exactly how to hate them, and now you stand here saying yes to everything. Marco looked at her with something bleak in his eyes. Would you prefer I lie? I'd prefer you hadn't done it. So would I. Jenna laughed bitterly. That's convenient. Nothing about this feels convenient. You live in a mansion with armed men at the gate, Marco. Forgive me if I'm unmoved by your discomfort. He accepted that too. Of course he did. Jenna turned toward the driver's door. We're done. There's something else. Her hand stopped on the handle. Of course there is. The Aldrich Foundation. Jenna went still. Marco said nothing for 2 seconds. And in those 2 seconds, every instinct she had sharpened. What about it? It wasn't real. Jenna turned slowly. What? The scholarship organization. Marco's voice lowered. There was no Aldrich Foundation. The cold air seemed to disappear from her lungs. That scholarship paid for culinary school. I know. 40,000 a year. I know. For 3 years. Yes. Jenna stared at him. No. Marco said nothing. No. She stepped toward him. You did not. His silence answered. You did not pay for my school. I did. Jenna felt the world tilt. She remembered the envelope arriving at her mother's apartment when she was 20. Heavy paper, an embossed letterhead. Congratulations, Miss Russo. The Aldrich Foundation is pleased to offer you a full culinary arts scholarship in recognition of exceptional promise. She had cried so hard, her mother thought someone had died. Jenna had been working mornings at a bakery and nights washing dishes. She had no savings, no connections, no plan beyond surviving 1 month at a time. That letter had changed everything. There was a plaque with the fake foundation's name hanging beside the office in her restaurant. How? She whispered. A lawyer set it up. Why? Marco looked at her like the answer hurt. Because I heard you got accepted and couldn't afford tuition. How did you hear? Mrs. Kowalski. Jenna laughed, but it came out broken. You were keeping track of me? From a distance. For how long? Years. Jesus Christ. She stepped backward. You think this makes you noble? No. You think you fixed it? No. Then why tell me? Because you were thanking a foundation that didn't exist. Jenna's eyes burned. I was proud of that scholarship. You should be. Don't. You earned your place. Don't tell me what I earned. Her voice cracked across the driveway. One of the distant security men turned his head. Marco did not move. Jenna pressed both hands against her temples. Every time I looked at that plaque, I thought somebody had seen talent in me. Somebody who had no reason to care. I thought it meant something. It did. It meant you felt guilty. No. What else could it mean? Marco's expression tightened. It meant you were good enough to get into one of the hardest programs in the city, and I had money you didn't. It meant I knew I had helped teach you to think you didn't deserve things. I couldn't undo that. I thought I could at least make sure money wasn't the reason you gave up. Jenna stared at him, tears threatening now, which made her even angrier. You put yourself inside the proudest thing I ever did. Marco went very still. Jenna. You put your guilt inside it. I didn't even get to know. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. She yanked open the van door. Please. The word left him rough and quiet. Let me explain one thing. Jenna looked at him. I never told anyone. I never used it to watch you. I never asked for anything. I didn't think I'd ever see you again. That's supposed to help? No. His mouth tightened. I don't know what helps. For once that sounded true. Jenna climbed into the van. Marco stepped back. He did not reach for the door, did not try to stop her. As she turned the ignition, he said, almost too softly for her to hear, You became everything. You became without me. The money only opened one door. You walked through every other one. Jenna looked straight ahead. I don't want anything from you again. Marco nodded. Understood. She drove away. She made it 3 miles before pulling into an empty gas station and parking beside a dead air pump. Then she sat behind the wheel with both hands gripping it and cried so hard she could barely breathe. She hated herself for crying. Hated Marco for being responsible for 2 of the most important emotional moments of her life without permission. First breaking her, then secretly helping fund the path she used to rebuild. Rage and gratitude tangled together until both felt contaminated. By the time she got home, it was after 1. She showered, changed into an oversized shirt, stood in her kitchen staring at nothing, and finally pulled the Aldrich scholarship letter from an old folder she kept in a drawer. She had saved the original. The paper was yellowing at the edges. The logo looked legitimate. She read the sentence about exceptional promise 3 times. Then she tore the letter in half. Immediately, she regretted it. Jenna sank into a chair, holding the 2 pieces. Damn you, she whispered. She did not know whether she meant Marco or herself. The next afternoon, a delivery arrived at the restaurant. Denise intercepted it and shouted from the back door. Chef, either someone is apologizing or we've accidentally become a nursery. Jenna walked out. 6 flats of living herbs sat on the loading dock. Basil, rosemary, thyme, lemon balm, sage, parsley, not cut flowers, not roses, plants. A small envelope rested on top. Jenna stared at it. Do I open it? Denise asked. No. Denise waited. Jenna sighed. Give it to me. Inside was 1 card. For the garden you told Mrs. Kowalski you'd have someday. Monsieur Jenna closed her eyes. Motherfucker. Denise leaned over. Romantic motherfucker? No. Rich motherfucker? Extremely. Those are good herbs. Jenna glared. You are not helping. I'm a chef. I respect produce. Jenna tore the card in half and dropped it into the trash. Then she looked at the plants. Put them by the window. Denise smiled. Thought so. Say one word, and you're on brunch prep for a month. Silent as the grave. Jenna kept the herbs. She told herself it was because wasting living plants would be childish. The explanation held for almost 6 hours. That evening, her food betrayed her. A regular sent back the sea base because the sauce was too aggressive. Jenna tasted it and immediately knew he was right. Too much chili. Too much acid. Not balanced. It tasted angry. You've been cooking like this all night, Denise said. Jenna set down the spoon. Like what? Like the plates owe you money. The plates are fine. Your beurre blanc just threatened me. Jenna glared. Denise folded her arms. Who is he? There is no he. There is always a he when butter starts carrying emotional subtext. Jenna wiped the pass harder than necessary. I knew someone when I was younger. The mansion guy. Jenna didn't answer. Denise's expression changed. He hurt you? Yes. Recently? A long time ago. Then why does your fish hate him today? Jenna almost smiled, but the truth sat too heavily. Because apparently he paid for culinary school. Denise's mouth fell open. Jenna gave her the shortest version possible. By the end, Denise was silent. That's, don't say romantic. I was going to say psychologically messy as hell. Good. Also maybe romantic in a deeply problematic prestige TV kind of way. Denise. Right, sorry. She looked toward the herbs. What are you going to do? Jenna stared at the ticket printer. Nothing. She meant it. For exactly 11 days. During those 11 days, Chicago began rearranging itself around her. The health inspector reviewing the second restaurant location suddenly approved everything that had been delayed for weeks. A distributor who owed Jenna $8,000 paid without argument and added interest. Her prospective landlord, who had ignored 3 emails about electrical repairs, called personally to apologize and promised the building would be ready early. At first, Jenna accepted the good luck because small business owners were trained to accept miracles without examining them. Then the landlord said, "We value our relationship with people connected to Mr. Vitali." Jenna went silent. "Excuse me?" The man panicked immediately. "I only meant—" Jenna hung up. She called the supplier. "Did Marco Vitali contact you?" Silence. "Who?" Wrong answer. Another silence. "Chef Russo. Look, I was told it would be in everyone's interest if your account was handled promptly." Jenna closed her eyes. "By whom?" "I don't know names. You know enough." She hung up and grabbed her coat. Denise watched her cross the restaurant. "Where are you going?" "North Shore." "Should I call somebody if you're not back?" "Call me first." "And if you don't answer," Jenna stopped. "Then call everybody." The Vitali gate opened before she reached the intercom. That made her angrier. Someone was already expecting her. A guard directed her to the front entrance. Jenna marched inside without waiting to be announced. A housekeeper intercepted her, took one look at Jenna's face, and wisely pointed toward the study. Marco stood behind a desk when she entered. He was in shirt sleeves, tie loosened, reading from a stack of papers. Surprise crossed his face, then caution. "Jenna, what did I tell you?" Marco put down the document. "About what?" "Don't." She slammed the study door behind her. "The permits. Supplier. Landlord." Understanding settled over his face. "I made some calls." "You made some calls?" "Yes. I told you I wanted nothing from you. You were being treated unfairly. That happens. It doesn't have to." "To normal people it does." Marco's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but concentration. Jenna paced in front of the desk. "Do you understand what you did? I spent 6 months negotiating that lease. 6 months. And now I don't know if I got it because I'm good at business, or because some terrified man thinks a mafia boss is standing behind me. You got it before I called. That's not the point." Marco exhaled. "Then tell me the point. The point is you're still controlling the room." He went quiet. Jenna stepped closer. "You did it when we were kids. You decided how people would see me. Now you're deciding how the city treats me. Different motive, same arrogance. That landed. She saw it. Marco sat slowly on the edge of the desk. I thought I was helping. Of course you did. I can undo it. That's still you doing something. His jaw tightened. Then what do you want? I want you to stop trying to fix things I didn't ask you to fix. Fine. And stop buying forgiveness. Marco's face changed. That isn't what I'm doing. Scholarship, herbs, permits, money recovered. What would you call it? Making things right. Exactly. Jenna pointed at him. You think this is a ledger? He stared at her. Your whole world is ledgers, isn't it? Someone hurts you, they pay. Someone gives something, you owe. Someone betrays, someone bleeds. Everything balances. Marco did not answer. Jenna felt something click into place. That's how you understand apology. His silence confirmed it. You're trying to close the account. I'm trying to repair damage. You can't. Marco looked at her sharply. Jenna's voice lowered. That's what you don't understand. You cannot repair it. You made a 15-year-old girl believe she was disgusting. You helped start a war between me and my own body that took years to end. I fixed that. Me. Therapy, work, failure, learning. Falling in love with food without using it to punish myself. Learning I could take up space without apologizing. I did that. Then I discover you secretly paid for school. So even my proudest achievement has your guilt stitched into the lining. Marco's hands flattened against the desk. Jenna saw a tremor move through one before he stopped it. You didn't fix anything, she said. You put your name on my healing without asking. The study went completely silent. Outside the windows, the lake was steel gray beneath a low sky. Marco looked down. When he spoke, his voice was barely above normal conversation. You're right, Jenna almost shouted. Stop doing that. What? Agreeing. I don't know what else to do when you're right. Fight back. Why? Because this is unbearable. Marco gave a humorless laugh. For me too. Jenna stared at him. You want to know something pathetic? He said. In my family, apology is a transaction. Exactly like you said. You offend someone, you pay. Money, territory, favor, blood. The account closes. I have spent 10 years trying to close yours. His mouth tightened. The scholarship was the first payment. I told myself it wasn't, but it was. Then the herbs. The calls. Every time I saw something I could make easier, I thought maybe that was one less thing sitting between us. There is no less. Marco looked up. Jenna held his eyes. That's the consequence. There is no receipt. No moment where I signed something saying we're even. He was silent for a long time. Then, what do I do with it? The question was so simple that it caught her off guard. Jenna swallowed. You carry it. Marco's gaze did not move. How long? Maybe forever. A muscle moved in his jaw. And you don't get to hand it back to me, because it's heavy. Marco nodded once. Not dramatic, not self-pitying, just acceptance. All right. Jenna suddenly felt tired. She looked around the study for the first time. Dark wood, shelves full of books, old photographs, a framed, black and white image of Marco as a boy beside a stern man. Jenna recognized vaguely as his father. What happened to you? She asked. Marco followed her gaze. You'll need to be more specific. At 16, you were an entitled asshole with rich parents. Now there are men at your gate checking vans for bombs. Guns, mostly. That was almost funny. I'm improving. Jenna's mouth twitched despite herself. She hated that too. Salvatore told me the last person who mattered to a Vitali nearly buried the family. Marco's expression went still. He said that? Basically, exact words matter with Salvatore. He told me to cook, leave, and not matter. Something dark moved behind Marco's eyes. He shouldn't have spoken to you. There you go again. That wasn't control. That was fact. Then give me the facts. Marco looked toward the study door, then crossed the room and locked it. Jenna raised an eyebrow. Dramatic. Necessary. He returned to the desk, but did not sit. My father was killed when I was 19. Jenna's sarcasm vanished. I'm sorry. Don't be. You didn't know him. Still, Marco looked at the photograph. He ran everything before me. Restaurants, unions, shipping contracts, gambling, other things. He was hard enough that people feared him, but he had one flaw according to the men around him. He loved someone. My mother. Jenna waited. She died when I was 17. Cancer. He changed after that. Softer in some places, crueler in others. Unpredictable. Salvatore started whispering that grief made him weak. Marco's expression flattened. 2 years later, my father attended a meeting with the Genoa family. Someone gave them his route, his security rotation, everything. Salvatore. I believe so. Believe? Knowing and proving are different. Jenna crossed her arms. And he's still your underboss. Yes. Why? Because he has half the old guard convinced he saved the family after my father died. If I kill him on suspicion, I split the organization in two and start a war that puts bodies in neighborhoods full of people who have nothing to do with any of this. Marco looked at her. I was 19 when my father died. Salvatore expected me to die too. Jenna's eyes moved toward his scar. Marco noticed. That? She asked. Later. He did it? Yes. And you kept him close. Close enemies are visible. Jenna shook her head. Your life is insane. That is a fair assessment. Why tell me? Because Salvatore already did. Marco's voice cooled. Not directly. But telling you not to matter was not advice. It was surveillance. He wanted you to know he sees you. Jenna's stomach tightened. Why? Marco looked away for the first time. Because he sees me. Meaning? Silence. Jenna suddenly understood enough to be angry. No. Say it. Marco looked at her. Say what? Whatever thing you're avoiding. His face hardened in a way she had not seen before. Not against her, against himself. You matter to me. Jenna's pulse kicked. After 3 weeks? After 17 years. That's ridiculous. Yes. You don't know me. I know that. Then you're in love with a memory. I spent 10 years trying to kill the memory. Jenna stared. Marco continued, voice low. Every cruel thing I learned to do after my father died, every time I chose fear over something softer, there was always a part of me that remembered one girl laughing at a stupid joke about a principal looking like a turtle, then remembered what I did to that girl, because I was frightened someone would know I liked her. He exhaled slowly. You became proof that my father was right about one thing and wrong about another. Caring does create leverage. But becoming the kind of man who cares about nothing is worse. Jenna's throat tightened. Don't romanticize me into a moral lesson. I'm trying not to. Try harder. I am. He looked exhausted. You asked what happened to me. I became a man who could not afford weakness. Then you walked into my kitchen and looked at me like I was still 16. You deserved it. I know. And now? Marco was silent for a long time. Now I'm beginning to suspect the boy you hated may be the only part of me that still remembers how to want anything that isn't power. Jenna should have left. Instead, she asked, What am I to you? The question slipped out before pride could stop it. Marco's eyes lifted to hers. The room seemed smaller. You're the argument I've been losing my whole life. Jenna frowned. That sounds rehearsed. It isn't. His mouth almost smiled, then didn't. The argument that feeling something doesn't make a man weak. The argument that maybe my father built his entire life around the wrong definition of strength. I've spent years proving he was right, because proving him wrong would mean admitting what I became wasn't necessary. And me? You make that difficult. Jenna stared at him. Marco continued quietly. I cannot afford you. Salvatore understands that. He looks at me and sees exactly what he has been waiting to see since I was 19. Which is, a person I might choose over the family. The honesty frightened her more than a lie would have. Jenna moved toward the door. That is not romantic. I know. It's dangerous. Yes. For me. Most of all. Jenna unlocked the door. Then stay away from me. Marco's face did not change. If that's what you want. She looked back. It is. All right. Jenna left. For the next 5 days, Marco stayed away. No herbs, no phone calls, no anonymous assistance. Jenna should have felt relieved. Instead, the absence annoyed her. That annoyed her more. She began noticing things she had no business noticing. Whether the front door opened at 10 on Tuesday, whether the corner seat at the bar remained empty, whether a black car slowed outside, none of it meant anything. She told herself that repeatedly until Friday, when Denise said, "You're checking the door every 8 minutes." Jenna almost dropped a spoon. "I'm checking reservations. Reservations are on the screen. Go dice something." "He listened, huh?" Jenna looked at her. Denise smiled. "You told him to stay away." "He did. That's inconvenient." "You're inconvenient. That's why you pay me." On the 6th night, Marco came in. Not unannounced exactly. He had made a reservation under his own name, party of 1, 9:30. Jenna considered canceling it. Instead, she put him at the counter. Marco arrived without visible security, though Jenna suspected there were men nearby. He sat, removed his jacket, ordered nothing. Jenna walked over. "You made a reservation. You said stay away. And yet, this is a restaurant. Very observant. I thought if you wanted me gone, you could refuse service." Jenna folded her arms. "And if I don't, then I sit here. Doing what?" Marco looked toward the open kitchen. "Eating, ideally." Jenna should have been furious. Instead, she found herself almost amused. Any allergies? Bad food. "You're safe." She fed him a plate that night, then another the following Tuesday. The arrangement developed slowly enough that neither of them admitted it was an arrangement. Marco appeared during quiet services, usually after 9. He sat at the same corner of the counter where he interfered least with staff. Jenna cooked whatever she felt like cooking. Sometimes he loved it. Sometimes he made the mistake of disagreeing with her. The first time he said a sauce needed more salt, Jenna stared at him for 3 full seconds. "Leave." Marco blinked. "Seriously?" "Immediately. It needs salt." Denise turned around with both hands over her mouth. Jenna slid the dish back toward him. "You run a criminal empire. I run this kitchen. Those things can both be true while this needs salt." Jenna tasted it. It needed salt. She hated him for almost an hour. But they talked. That was the dangerous part. Not flirting. Conversation. Jenna asked questions she had carried for years. "Why did you smile?" Marco knew immediately what she meant. "Cafeteria?" "Yes, because everyone was watching me." "That's your answer?" "It's the truth." "You saw me looking at you." "Yes, and you knew I was hurt." "Yes." "Then you smiled." Marco lowered his eyes. "Because if I looked sorry, they would know it mattered." Jenna absorbed that. Coward. "Yes." Another night she asked, "Did you ever think about apologizing before now?" "Every year." "Why didn't you?" "At first because I was ashamed. Later, because I learned you were doing well, and convinced myself appearing would only force you to deal with me." That part was almost considerate. "Almost," they argued. They laughed unexpectedly. Jenna discovered Marco hated olives but loved anchovies, which she considered morally inconsistent. Marco discovered Jenna watched terrible cooking competitions and shouted at television contestants. He confessed that his only culinary skill was carbonara. She made him prove it. One Tuesday after closing, Marco stood in her kitchen with his sleeves rolled up, looking absurdly serious over a pan of pancetta. Jenna watched him dump cream into the sauce. "What are you doing?" "Making carbonara." "Get out." Marco looked offended. "It's cream." "Exactly. My mother used cream." "Your mother was wrong." His eyebrows rose. "You insult dead women?" "Only when they put cream in carbonara." Denise nearly collapsed, laughing. Marco produced something edible but spiritually offensive. Jenna tasted one forkful and stared at him. "You have people afraid to say no to you, don't you?" "Probably. That explains how you reached adulthood believing this was good." Marco laughed. It startled her. Not because she had never heard him laugh. She remembered the teenage version too well. This was different. Adult Marco usually smiled minimally, as if every visible emotion had first passed security clearance. But this laugh escaped him. Head tipped back, eyes closing. Real. Jenna felt something inside her move. That frightened her more than Salvatore's warning. The attraction was not sudden. It accumulated, Marco's hand resting near hers on the counter. The way he always stood when she approached, an old-fashioned habit she mocked until she realized he did it only with her. The way he remembered details without weaponizing them. The way he listened when she was angry, instead of waiting for anger to finish. Most of all, the way he never touched her. Not once. There were moments when touching would have been natural. Passing a plate, standing beside her in the doorway, walking outside after closing. Marco always stopped a fraction before contact. Jenna began noticing the restraint. One night, their hands reached for the same wine glass. His fingers came within an inch of hers and pulled back. "You can touch a glass," she said. Marco looked at her. "I know. You act like I'll shoot you. I'm less worried about being shot." "Then what?" His expression changed slightly. "I spent years taking things from you without permission." Jenna's breath caught. Marco looked away. "I'm trying not to make that mistake again." That sentence followed her home. 3 nights later, rain came down hard over Chicago. By closing, water hammered the restaurant windows and turned the street into black glass. Marco had stayed late. Denise left first, throwing Jenna a look so obvious it should have been illegal. Marco waited while Jenna locked the front door. "I can walk you to your car," he said. "I'm capable." "I know." "Then why ask?" "Because capable people can still appreciate umbrellas." He held one up. Jenna sighed. "Fine." They stepped outside. The umbrella lasted 30 seconds before wind turned it inside out. Jenna laughed. Powerful mafia boss defeated by weather. This city has always been hostile. Rain soaked them quickly. Marco threw the broken umbrella into a bin. They continued toward Jenna's car, both drenched. Beneath a street lamp, she looked at him and saw water running over the scar through his eyebrow. "Salvatore?" she asked. Marco touched the scar instinctively. "You remembered. You said later." He was quiet. "The night my father died, I went after Salvatore." Jenna stopped walking. Marco stopped too. "You were 19. "Yes. Alone?" "Stupidly." "What happened?" "He had 3 men. I had anger." Marco gave a small smile. "Anger lost." "He cut you?" "Pistol sight. He hit me with it." Jenna winced. "Why didn't he kill you?" "He thought leaving me alive would be more useful. A frightened boy makes mistakes. He wanted the family to see me fail." Jenna raised one hand without thinking. Her fingers touched the scar. Marco went completely still. Jenna almost pulled back. Instead, she let her thumb trace the raised skin once. Marco's eyes closed. He did not lean in. Not really. Just the smallest movement of his face toward her palm, as though warmth existed there and he had forgotten what warmth felt like. Rain ran down both of them. Jenna realized he would not kiss her, not unless she did something first. The understanding was almost unbearable. This man had once controlled how a room saw her. Now he would stand in the rain forever, rather than assume access to 1 inch of her. Jenna's heart beat violently. "Marco." His eyes opened. "Yes? I still hate what you did. I know. Part of me may always hate it. I know. And I am not forgiving you because you paid tuition, or planted herbs, or learned to sit quietly at my counter. I know." Jenna almost laughed. "You really need another phrase. I'm working on it." She looked at his mouth. Then, back at his eyes. "This is a terrible idea. Almost certainly." So Jenna kissed him. She did it because she wanted to know. Because wanting him had become a pressure she could no longer pretend was only anger. Because the boy who once made her feel grotesque had become a man who looked at her as if every part of her deserved careful attention. Because healing had taught her one thing above everything else: refusing something you want solely because another person once made you ashamed is still letting them control you. Marco did not move for half a second. Then his hands came up, stopped beside her waist, and waited. Jenna caught one and placed it against her side. That was all the permission he needed. He kissed her back. Not gently exactly. There was too much history for gentle, but carefully, fiercely restrained, like a man who had spent years believing this particular door would remain closed and was afraid a single careless movement might slam it shut again. Jenna's fingers slid into his wet hair. Marco made a sound low in his throat. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I have imagined that," he said. "Don't ruin it." "Understood." Jenna laughed. He smiled. Rain poured around them. For one impossible minute, nothing existed except the street, the weather, and two people standing inside a mistake that somehow felt like a beginning. Someone photographed them from across the street. Neither noticed. The next week was dangerous because it was happy. Marco still came to the restaurant. Jenna still mocked him. He kissed her once in the pantry, and she nearly forgot an entire table's desserts. He brought no gifts, made no calls on her behalf, asked before sending a car when her van was in the shop. When she said no, he said fine. The simplicity of that almost undid her. Jenna began wondering what loving him might look like. She refused to name the thought. Then the black sedan appeared. The first time she noticed it outside the restaurant at midnight. Dark windows, engine running. It disappeared when she approached. 2 days later, her produce supplier called. "Chef, I'm sorry. We can't fulfill tomorrow's order." "Why?" "Inventory." "You're lying." Silence. "Who called you?" "I don't know what you mean." "Say Marco Vitali and I hang up." Another silence. "It wasn't Mr. Vitali." Jenna's stomach tightened. "Then who?" "I don't know. Someone said continuing to supply you might complicate our other contracts." "Which contracts?" "Chef." "Fine." She hung up and called another supplier. Problem solved within an hour. But she told Marco that night. His expression hardened instantly. "What company?" "No." "Jenna. You said you would stop fixing things." "This isn't fixing. It's threat assessment." "Same addiction. Fancier label." Marco almost smiled, but worry remained. "Did they give you a name?" "No." "Car outside?" Jenna hesitated. Marco saw it. "What car?" "Black sedan. Twice." His face changed. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because black sedans are not rare in Chicago." "Near your restaurant after midnight?" "Still not rare." Marco stood. "I'm putting someone outside." Jenna's temper rose. "No. Not negotiable. Everything involving my life is negotiable." Marco stopped. The room went still. Jenna held his gaze. "This is the exact point where you prove whether you actually learned anything." He looked furious. Not at her. At himself. At the danger. At whatever instincts were screaming in him. "I cannot protect you if you refuse protection. Ask." "What?" "Ask me. Don't order me." Marco's jaw worked. Then, visibly, he forced himself to breathe. "Will you let me place someone nearby? Not inside. Not following you. Watching the street. You'll have the number. You can tell him to leave whenever you want." Jenna considered. "One person. 2. 1. They rotate." "Fine." Marco nodded. "Thank you." The next escalation came 3 days later. Jenna found an envelope beneath her apartment door. No stamp. No address. Her first instinct was irritation. Then she saw the photograph inside. Her entire body went cold. She and Marco stood in the rain outside her restaurant. Her hand on his face. His mouth against hers. The angle was distant, taken from across the street through a long lens. On the back, someone had written in neat black ink, "A Vitali in love is a Vitali waiting to be buried." I have seen this story before. I know how it ends. Jenna called Marco. He arrived 11 minutes later. She knew because she watched the clock. He entered with one bodyguard, but ordered the man to remain in the hallway. Jenna handed him the photograph. Marco read the message once, then again. His face emptied. That frightened her more than anger. "Salvatore," Jenna said. "Yes. What does he want?" Marco turned the photograph over. "At first I thought he wanted you gone." "Comforting. But if that were all, he wouldn't send this." "Then what?" Marco walked to the window and looked down at the street. "He's making sure I know he can reach you." Jenna crossed her arms tightly. "Why?" "Because he wants me to react." "How?" "Badly." Understanding began to form. Marco looked at her. "If I move against him now, he tells the capos I'm starting a war over a woman. He proves everything he's said about me since my father died. That love makes you weak. That love makes me irrational." Jenna looked at the photograph. "So don't be irrational." Marco laughed once, but there was no humor in it. You make that sound very simple. It is simple, not easy. His eyes lifted. Jenna continued. You said you've been building a case against him for years. I have. Then use it. It isn't enough yet. What are you missing? Marco hesitated. A witness. Who? Renzo Carbone. He was there the night my father was betrayed. He helped Salvatore arrange the route. And he'll talk? Eventually. Marco looked at the photograph again. He's dying. Liver. He's been drinking himself toward confession for 5 years. Jenna leaned against the table. Then don't let Salvatore bait you. Get the evidence. Do it in front of everyone. Make this not about me. Marco stared at her. You understand that during that time he may escalate. I understand. You could be hurt. I understand. Jenna, I spent half my life being underestimated because people looked at my body and decided I was soft, slow, weak, desperate, stupid, grateful for attention. Whatever story made them comfortable. I know what it's like to let someone misjudge you while you wait for the right moment. She stepped closer. Let him misjudge you. Marco said nothing. For the first time since she had known him, Jenna watched Marco Vitali willingly accept someone else's strategy. All right, he said. We do it your way. Our way. Something softened in his face. Our way. The next 2 weeks became a war, fought in silence. Marco stopped appearing at the restaurant as often, but Jenna knew why. Protection stayed nearby without becoming suffocating. The black sedan disappeared. Nothing dramatic happened. That was almost worse. Every car door closing after midnight sounded significant. Every unknown number made her stomach tighten. Marco worked Renzo slowly. He told Jenna enough that she understood the shape of it. No threats. No money. Renzo wanted his younger sister protected from whatever followed. Marco promised she would be. Renzo began talking. Dates, names, routes, payments, Salvatore's role. Marco recorded everything. Almost enough, he told Jenna one night over the phone. How close? Days. Then wait. Silence. Marco? I hate waiting. I know. You enjoyed saying that. A little. He laughed quietly. Good night, Chef Russo. Good night, criminal. That feels reductive. Sleep well. 3 nights later, at 2:40 in the morning, Marco walked into Jenna's restaurant with blood on his knuckles. Jenna was there doing inventory because anxiety had ruined sleep anyway. She saw him through the glass door and unlocked it immediately. What happened? Marco entered. His coat was wet from rain. His right hand was split across 2 knuckles. Renzo's dead. Jenna went still. How? Found in the river. Salvatore. Yes. You know? I know. Marco's voice sounded like metal. Jenna locked the door behind him. Sit. I don't want to sit. Then stand, but stop dripping on my floor. Marco almost smiled. It vanished instantly. He paced toward the kitchen. Jenna followed. The recording? She asked. Gone. How? Renzo had it with him. My man arrived 10 minutes late. Marco slammed one hand against the stainless steel counter. Jenna flinched despite herself. He saw it and immediately stepped back. Sorry. Your hand. Doesn't matter. It's bleeding on my prep station. It matters. Jenna grabbed the first aid kit. Marco stood motionless while she cleaned his knuckles. Whose blood? She asked. Mostly mine. Mostly. One of Salvatore's people knew where Renzo had been taken. Did you kill him? Marco looked at her. No. Jenna exhaled. I wanted to. I know. Stop saying that. The corner of his mouth twitched. Then his face broke again. I know where Salvatore sleeps. Jenna froze. Marco stared at the floor. I have known for years. I could finish this before sunrise. And prove him right. Renzo is dead. And Salvatore wants you angry. I am angry. Exactly. Marco pulled his hand away. He threatened you. He killed the only witness who could end this without a war. At what point does patience become stupidity? Jenna stepped closer. At the point where it stops having a purpose. Has it? Marco's breathing was heavy. The evidence is gone. All of it? The recording. Did Renzo know he was in danger? Marco looked at her. Of course. Did he trust you completely? Eventually. Was he stupid? No. Then maybe he planned for this. Marco's expression changed, just slightly. Jenna continued. You said he was drinking himself toward confession for years. People carrying guilt that long rehearse their endings. Marco stared at her. His phone rang. Both of them looked down. Marco pulled it out. Unknown number. He answered. Vitale. Silence. His eyes sharpened. Who is this? Another silence. Then his face went completely still. Jenna watched the anger drain out and something colder replace it. When? He asked. He listened. Don't open anything. I'm coming. He ended the call. What? Jenna asked. Marco looked at her. Renzo left a second copy. Relief hit so hard Jenna gripped the counter. Where? With a lawyer. Instructions to release it if he died. Marco looked toward the rain-black windows. Salvatore killed the witness who activates the evidence. Jenna felt the shape of the trap reverse itself. He cut himself. Marco nodded slowly. Yes. For the first time that night, the mafia boss disappeared from his face, and the man returned. Jenna reached for his wounded hand. Then don't ruin it. Marco looked down at her fingers around his. Meaning? No guns. No revenge tonight. You carry it. His eyes closed. He leaned forward until his forehead rested against hers. For several seconds, neither moved. You have no idea what you ask of me, he whispered. I think I do. I could end him in 20 minutes. And spend the next 20 years knowing he decided what kind of man you became. Marco inhaled slowly. Jenna tightened her grip. He doesn't win when he hurts you, she said. He wins when you become him. Marco opened his eyes. Something in them steadied. All right, say it like you mean it. I won't go after him tonight. Good. His phone rang again. This time, one of his men. Marco answered. Jenna watched his expression shift as he listened. Repeat that. A pause. How many? Another pause. Marco's eyes moved to Jenna. Where? He listened, then ended the call. What now? Jenna asked. Marco did not answer immediately. Marco. Salvatore called a sit-down. With who? Every capo loyal enough to still matter and disloyal enough to worry me. Jenna's stomach dropped. When? Tomorrow night. Why? Marco looked toward the dark restaurant, at the tables stacked with chairs, the herb plants on the back windowsill, the ordinary life that existed outside his world. He thinks Renzo is dead, and the evidence died with him. So he thinks he won. Yes, Jenna saw where this was going. He's going to accuse you of being compromised. Because of me. Because of what you represent. Marco looked at the photograph still protruding from her coat pocket. He'll show them everything. The surveillance. My visits here. He'll tell them I'm my father all over again. Jenna felt fear rise, but beneath it something sharper. And you have the recording. Not yet. The lawyer won't release it until morning. Then tomorrow you walk into that room and let Salvatore talk. Marco stared at her. You think I should let him make the case? I think you should let him believe he's winning. That is dangerous. So are you. Marco almost smiled. Jenna stepped closer. Do it in the open. Like we said. You won't be there. It was not phrased as a question. Jenna bristled. Marco raised one hand. Not because you can't handle it. Because Salvatore will use you as a physical target if you're in the room. And then every instinct I have becomes exactly what he needs. This one thing. Let me ask. Jenna studied him. He was not ordering. She saw how much effort that distinction cost him. You're asking me to stay away tomorrow. Yes, because it makes the plan stronger. Yes, not because you think I belong behind glass while men decide my life. No. Jenna exhaled. Fine. Marco's shoulders loosened slightly. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Why? Because if you get yourself killed after all this, I will find a way to resurrect you just so I can kill you personally. Marco smiled then, tired, bruised, blood drying over his knuckles, but real. That is the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. Your standards are disturbing. You already knew that. He lifted her hand and stopped before touching his lips to it. He waited. Jenna rolled her eyes and moved her hand the final inch herself. Marco kissed her knuckles. Then his phone vibrated again. The moment ended. Work returned. Danger returned. Marco straightened. I need to meet the lawyer. Jenna nodded. He reached the door, then looked back. For one strange second, he resembled the 16-year-old boy she remembered, not the cruel one, but the earlier boy from science class who had once stolen her fries and made her laugh during assembly. That frightened her more than the mafia boss ever had. Jenna. What? If tomorrow goes wrong, don't. No. She crossed the room. You don't get to turn this into a goodbye scene because you're nervous. Marco's jaw tightened. I'm not nervous. You're terrified. He said nothing. Jenna put both hands against his face. Good. Marco blinked. Good? Maybe fear isn't the enemy. Maybe it's just information. She touched the scar in his eyebrow. You're afraid because you have something to lose. That doesn't make you weak. What you do because you're afraid decides that. Marco stared at her. Rain whispered against the windows. And what am I supposed to do with that? He asked. Jenna thought of the old ledger. The debt that would never close. The boy he had been. The man he could still choose to become. Carry it. Marco closed his eyes. Then he kissed her once, softly, and left. Jenna locked the door behind him. She stood alone in the dark restaurant for a long time after his car disappeared. Finally, she went to the back window where the herbs he had sent weeks earlier had begun growing wild in their pots. Rosemary leaned toward the glass. Basil had gone to flower. Lemon balm spilled over one side. Jenna touched a leaf between her fingers and thought about the girl she had been at 15, sitting behind a bathroom door, believing humiliation could define the size of her life. She had survived that boy. She had survived herself afterward. She had built every important thing without waiting for anyone to return and apologize. That mattered. It always would. Marco's redemption, if it existed at all, did not rewrite Jenna's past. It did not rescue the teenage girl after the fact. It did not make cruelty secretly romantic, because the cruel boy had liked her all along. What Marco had done was wrong. Full stop. The only question remaining was whether the man he became could live honestly beside that truth. Jenna looked toward the front door. Tomorrow night, Salvatore would force that answer. Not in words, in choices. Across the city, Marco Vitali sat in the back seat of a black sedan, with Renzo's death burning in his chest, and Jenna's final sentence, louder than vengeance. Carry it. His phone rang. His consigliere's voice came through immediately. Boss, we've got another problem. Marco stared out at Chicago, sliding past beneath the rain. What? Salvatore moved the meeting. Marco's eyes narrowed. To when? Not tomorrow. A pause. Tonight. Marco looked at the dashboard clock. 3:17 a.m. Where? Taylor Street. Old butcher shop. Marco went still. The oldest family meeting place. Neutral ground. No excuses. No delay. No time for the lawyer to deliver Renzo's recording. How long? Marco asked. 40 minutes. He closed his eyes. Salvatore had calculated perfectly. Renzo dead. Evidence presumed destroyed. Capos already summoned. Marco emotionally compromised. No time to prepare. The trap was closing. Boss? Marco opened his eyes. In his mind, he saw Jenna standing beneath the kitchen lights, holding his bleeding hand and telling him not to become the man who had hurt him. He saw the photograph of them kissing in the rain. Saw his father leaving home the final night of his life. Saw Salvatore's hand holding the pistol that created the scar across his face. Turn around, Marco said. Where are we going? Marco looked toward the wet city. Taylor Street. Without the recording? We don't have a choice. Marco, turn around. The driver obeyed. The sedan crossed 2 lanes and disappeared toward downtown. Back at the restaurant, Jenna's phone lit up on the counter. One message from Marco. 3 words. Meeting moved up. Jenna stared at it. Then another message arrived. Stay where you are. She read it twice. Her heart began pounding. Outside, across the street, a black sedan rolled slowly out of the darkness and stopped beneath a dead street lamp. Jenna looked toward the window. A rear door opened. A man stepped onto the sidewalk. Not Marco, Salvatore. He lifted his face toward the restaurant and smiled. Jenna's blood went cold. At the exact same moment, Marco was driving into a meeting designed to destroy him without the evidence that could save him. And the man who had built the trap was standing outside Jenna's door. Salvatore De Luca stood beneath the dead street lamp across from Jenna's restaurant, as though he had all the time in the world. Rain silvered the shoulders of his dark overcoat. Behind him, the black sedan idled with its lights off, exhaust curling pale into the cold Chicago night. He did not wave. He did not need to. He simply looked through the restaurant window and smiled, and Jenna understood immediately that Marco had been wrong about one thing. Salvatore had never intended to choose between destroying Marco politically and threatening Jenna physically. He intended to do both at once. Her phone was still in her hand. Marco's message glowed on the screen. "Stay where you are." Jenna almost laughed. Of all the moments for him to issue an order, she backed away from the window without taking her eyes off Salvatore and called Marco. It rang once, twice, then voicemail. She called again. Nothing. Across the street, Salvatore started walking. Jenna locked the front door, though the gesture felt absurd. If the stories Marco had told her were even half true, a restaurant lock was not going to stop a man like Salvatore. She moved toward the kitchen. Knives, heavy pans, fire extinguishers, a rear exit. Her mind cataloged everything automatically, not because she imagined herself winning a gunfight with cookware, but because kitchens had taught her that panic was wasted motion. When a grease fire started, you did not scream about fire. You found the lid. Salvatore reached the front door and knocked. 3 polite taps. Jenna stayed where she was. Another 3 taps. Then, his voice came through the glass. "Chef Russo." She said nothing. "I can see you." "Congratulations." His smile widened. "May I come in?" "No. I appreciate clarity." "Then appreciate it from outside." Salvatore glanced up and down the empty street. Marco is currently on his way to a meeting that will determine whether he remains head of his family by sunrise. Jenna's pulse kicked. "Sounds like you should be there. Eventually." "Then you're wasting time." "No." Salvatore leaned closer to the glass. "I'm using it." Jenna stared at him. "What do you want?" 5 minutes. "You got 30 seconds. Marco's father once spoke exactly like that, when he thought confidence could substitute for caution. 25. The smile vanished from Salvatore's face. "You believe you are helping Marco." 20. "You believe you are teaching him strength." 15. "You are going to get him killed." Jenna's counting stopped. Salvatore saw it. "There she is," he said softly. "That is the part I came to speak to. You don't know anything about me." "I know enough. I know Marco Vitali has spent more time in this restaurant in 6 weeks than he spent inside his own mother's house during the last 6 months of her life. I know he dismissed 2 profitable opportunities because they involved men connected to businesses that threatened your second location. I know he changed his security rotation because you disliked seeing armed men near your customers. I know he has begun asking permission." Salvatore said the last word, as though it were obscene. "Imagine that. A Vitali asking." Jenna's fingers tightened around the phone. "You confuse respect with weakness." "No. You confuse weakness with virtue. And you confuse fear with strength." Something flashed in Salvatore's eyes. Jenna saw she had hit something real. "Marco told you about his father," Salvatore said. "Enough." "Then he told you his preferred version. The version where you sold him to the Genoese?" Salvatore became very still. Jenna knew immediately she had revealed too much. "Interesting," he murmured. "So Marco has finally been speaking openly. You should try it sometime. Did he tell you he has proof?" Jenna did not answer. Salvatore watched her face. He was good. Too good. "Renzo is dead," he continued. "Whatever stories a dying drunk told Marco died with him." Jenna kept her expression flat. "Then why are you standing here instead of celebrating?" A tiny pause. Salvatore's eyes sharpened. "Because I wanted to see the woman worth losing an empire over." "Disappointed?" His gaze moved over her slowly, and Jenna felt the old reflex, the ancient instinct to interpret scrutiny through the lens of her body. Too big, too visible, too much. She killed the thought before it could finish forming. Salvatore smiled faintly. "Actually, no. I understand it now. How touching. You do something nobody around Marco has done since he was a boy. You tell him no." Jenna said nothing. That is intoxicating to men who have spent their lives being obeyed. But intoxication passes. Is that why you're afraid of me? Salvatore laughed. Afraid? You sabotaged suppliers, followed me, photographed me, killed a man. Now you're standing outside a locked restaurant at 3 a.m, giving a speech about why I don't matter. That's a lot of effort for something unimportant. His smile disappeared. Jenna continued. You need me to be weakness because if I'm not, your entire religion falls apart. Religion? Love makes men weak. Feeling makes men predictable. Fear is strength. You've built your whole life around it. She stepped closer to the glass. What happens if Marco walks into that room tonight and proves you wrong? Salvatore's eyes hardened. He won't. Then why aren't you there? For the first time, Jenna saw anger beneath the polish. Not explosive anger, something older. Salvatore reached inside his coat. Jenna's body tensed. He removed a phone. Because, he said, I wanted him to know exactly what choosing you costs. He held the screen toward the glass. A live video feed showed Marco's sedan moving through the city. Another angle showed the butcher shop on Taylor Street. Men entering. Salvatore had cameras on both. You think you're controlling him? Jenna said. I think everyone is controlled by something. Including you, especially me. That answer surprised her. Salvatore slipped the phone away. Open the door. No. I am trying to offer you a chance to prevent bloodshed. By doing what? Leave. Jenna almost laughed. That's it? Disappear tonight. Marco receives a message saying you understood what he refused to understand. The capos see the distraction removed. He keeps his chair. Nobody dies, except Renzo. Salvatore's face did not change. Renzo made his choices. And Marco's father, a beat. Also. There it was. Not confession exactly. Something worse. Conviction. Jenna looked at the man outside and finally understood why Marco had been unable to defeat him for years. Salvatore did not believe he was evil. He believed he was necessary. You really think you saved them, Jenna said. I know I did. By murdering their boss. By removing a man whose grief was destabilizing everything 4 generations had built. And putting yourself beside his 19-year-old son so you could control what came next. Marco survived because I taught him what his father failed to. Jenna shook her head. No, Marco survived you. Salvatore's jaw tightened. Open the door. Still no. You think this is courage? No. This is me being tired of men deciding what I'm supposed to do because they think they understand my life better than I do. Salvatore stared at her. Then he nodded slowly. So be it. He turned away. Jenna's stomach tightened. That's all? Salvatore stopped. You expected violence? From you? Eventually. Violence is usually what happens after conversation fails. He looked back. You have chosen not to listen, and you have chosen not to hear. Salvatore smiled again. Tell Marco I gave you the option. Tell him yourself. I intend to. He walked back toward the sedan. Jenna watched until the rear door closed and the car disappeared around the corner. Only then did she realize her hands were shaking. She called Marco again. No answer. Then she remembered the security man Marco had assigned nearby. She had his number. She called. Chef? Where are you? Half block west. Did you see Salvatore? Silence. Yes. And you did nothing? Boss's instructions were observe unless you were in immediate danger. Jenna closed her eyes. Marco had actually honored the boundaries they negotiated, even now. Where did Salvatore go? East. 2 cars with him. Toward Taylor Street? Looks like it. Jenna checked the clock. How far is Marco? 10 minutes, maybe less. Call him. I have. Keep calling. She hung up. Across the city, Marco Vitale sat in the back of his sedan with one hand closed around his phone and the other pressed against his knee hard enough to stop it from moving. His consigliere, Luca Ferraro, sat opposite him. Luca was 47, compact, perpetually tired, and one of the only men in the organization who had known Marco before. Fear became attached to his name. We should turn around, Luca said. And do what? Wait for the lawyer. Salvatore called every capo worth calling, which means it's a trap. Obviously. You're walking into it without Renzo's recording. Marco looked through the window. If I don't show, Salvatore wins without speaking. Luca cursed softly. Your father would have gone in shooting. I know. Salvatore knows too. Marco looked at him. Luca understood. That's what he wants. Yes. Then what's the plan? Marco thought of Jenna. Carry it. We listen. Luca stared. That's the plan? We let him talk. And when he tells the room you've lost your mind over a woman? We let him talk. And when half those men believe him? Marco's jaw tightened. We let them. Luca studied him. You really love her. Marco's eyes moved toward him. Luca raised both hands. Not criticism, observation. Dangerous observation tonight. Everything is dangerous tonight. The car slowed. Ahead stood an old butcher shop squeezed between a shuttered bakery and an apartment building. Vitale Meats had been closed to the public for 12 years, but the family still owned it. Marco remembered being 8 years old and sitting on an overturned milk crate in the back, while his grandfather argued with men over envelopes of cash. He remembered the smell of sawdust and raw meat. He remembered his father telling him, "This room existed before you, and it'll exist after you." Never confuse sitting at the table with owning it. Tonight, Salvatore intended to use that same table to remove him. Marco stepped from the car. 6 men waited outside. None smiled. Luca moved beside him. Boss. Marco turned. Whatever happens in there, don't reach first. I was about to tell you the same thing. Marco entered. The back room had changed almost not at all. Scarred wooden table, single hanging light, old tiles stained by decades of work. 9 capos sat around the table. Some Marco trusted, some he tolerated. 2 he suspected had already chosen Salvatore. There was 1 empty chair at the head. His chair. Marco walked to it and sat. Where is Salvatore? Nobody answered. Then the rear door opened. Salvatore entered, removing wet leather gloves finger by finger. His gaze met Marco's. Apologies, he said. I had a stop to make. Marco's blood went cold. Where? Salvatore smiled. Your restaurant. Marco stood so fast the chair scraped backward. Around the table, every man reacted. Exactly as Salvatore wanted. Marco saw it in the satisfaction behind his eyes. Jenna. Marco's hand moved toward his jacket. Luca whispered, Marco, 1 word. Enough. Marco remembered Jenna touching his face in the kitchen. You're afraid because you have something to lose. That doesn't make you weak. What you do because you're afraid decides that. Marco slowly lowered his hand. Is she alive? Salvatore tilted his head. Interesting first question. Answer it. Perfectly. Marco sat back down. Salvatore's disappointment lasted less than a second, but Marco saw it. Then start your meeting. Salvatore removed his coat and placed it over a chair. My meeting? You summoned everyone at 3 in the morning. You clearly practiced something. I'd hate to waste the performance. A few men smiled faintly. Salvatore's eyes cooled. He remained standing. All right. He placed both palms on the table. We have survived because the Vitale family understood one rule better than our enemies. The chair belongs to the family, not the man sitting in it. Marco said nothing. Your grandfather understood. Your father forgot. The room went still. Careful, Luca said. Salvatore ignored him. Antonio Vitale allowed grief to cloud judgment. He changed agreements because his wife disliked certain businesses. He spared men who should have been removed because she knew their families. He put affection over structure. And when pressure came, he became predictable. Marco's fingers curled under the table. Salvatore continued. Now his son repeats the disease. He removed an envelope. Photographs slid across the table. Marco entering Jenna's restaurant. Marco walking beside her. Marco standing in the rain with Jenna's hand on his face. Their kiss. The capos looked. Nobody spoke. A woman, Salvatore said. A chef. No connection to our world except history with our boss. Yet suppliers are being contacted. Security rotations changed. Business decisions delayed. Men reassigned. By you, Marco said. Salvatore looked at him. Excuse me? The supplier interference. Surveillance. Threats. Those were yours. And how many resources did you expend responding? Less than you spent creating the problem. One capo, Dominic Greco, leaned forward. Is the woman protected? Marco answered. Yes. How many men? One rotation. Used to be 4, Salvatore said. Marco looked at him. Because she told me 4 men outside her restaurant frightened customers. Silence. Salvatore smiled. There, a boss changing security because his woman dislikes the appearance. Marco felt the trap. She isn't my woman. Something in his own wording disgusted him. He corrected it immediately. She is Jenna Russo. She owns herself. I changed the detail because 4 men were unnecessary. Several capos exchanged glances. Salvatore seized it. Listen to him. Language of permission. Language of accommodation. Our boss has begun asking whether he may protect someone. Maybe you should try asking people things, Luca muttered. Salvatore ignored him. The issue is not romance. Men have women. The issue is leverage. He looked around the table. How many of you believe Marco would sacrifice this woman if protecting the family required it? Silence. Marco felt every eye turn toward him. Salvatore looked satisfied. Marco? There were several possible answers. The old Marco knew which one the room expected. Of course. Family first. Always. Jenna was nothing. He could say it. He could lie and keep the chair. He imagined 15-year-old Jenna looking across the cafeteria after he drew the cartoon. He remembered smiling because everyone was watching. He had spent 17 years living inside that one cowardly choice. Hurt the person who mattered before other men could use her against you. Salvatore was offering him the same choice again. Publicly deny Jenna mattered and prove himself strong. Marco leaned back. No. The room shifted. Salvatore almost smiled. No? I would not sacrifice her. Luca closed his eyes briefly. One capo cursed under his breath. Marco continued before anyone could interrupt. And if any man at this table thinks strength means murdering an innocent person to prove loyalty, he can challenge my chair tonight. Silence. There it is, Salvatore said softly. His father. Marco looked at him. No, me. Salvatore spread his hands. Gentlemen, what more do you require? Our boss admits. There is a person he places outside the family's authority. Every man here has someone outside the family's authority, Marco said. Wives, children, mothers, sisters. Not everyone is boss. Exactly, which means I should be better at carrying responsibility, not worse at being human. Salvatore laughed. Humanity. Your father used that word too. You mention my father often for the man who murdered him. The room went dead, silent. Salvatore's expression did not move. Dominic Greco looked between them. That accusation has been around years, and never proved, Salvatore said. Because the witness conveniently died tonight, Marco replied. A flicker, tiny. But there, Renzo Carbone was a drunk, Salvatore said. A dying one. Still dangerous enough to kill. You accuse me without evidence. Not yet, Salvatore smiled. Then we are wasting time. He turned toward the capos. Marco Vitale has accused an underboss of murder because the only witness to his fantasy died. Meanwhile, he admits openly that he will put an outsider over family necessity. If his father were alive— If my father were alive, Marco interrupted, you'd still be pretending loyalty to his face. Salvatore's eyes went cold. Marco's phone vibrated in his pocket. Everyone heard it. He did not reach for it. Another vibration. Then Luca's phone. Luca glanced at the screen. His expression changed. He leaned toward Marco. Lawyer. Salvatore saw it. Marco held out his hand. Luca passed him the phone. A message. File received. Audio verified. Certified copy attached. Marco felt something inside him become perfectly still. Salvatore was speaking again. Whatever arrives on a phone after a meeting begins can be fabricated. Marco looked up. You're right. That answer surprised everyone. Marco placed the phone face down. So we won't use the file. Luca stared at him. Salvatore smiled. Wise. Marco continued. The lawyer is coming here. The smile vanished. What? Renzo didn't leave me a recording. He left it with an attorney. Sealed instructions, time-stamped, notarized, released upon his death. Marco watched Salvatore understand. You killed him too early. For the first time in all the years Marco had known him, Salvatore looked genuinely uncertain. That proves nothing. Then you won't mind waiting. 27 minutes later, attorney Evelyn Shaw entered the butcher shop, carrying a leather briefcase and the expression of a woman profoundly unimpressed by organized crime. She was 63, gray-haired, and had represented Renzo's sister for years. 2 neutral witnesses came with her. Mr. Vitale, she said. Mr. De Luca. Salvatore did not answer. Evelyn placed a recorder on the table. Renzo Carbone retained my office 4 months ago. He deposited a sworn statement and supporting documents with instructions that they remain sealed unless he died under suspicious circumstances. At 1:46 this morning, police notified his sister that his body had been recovered from the Chicago River. Under his written instructions, the material is now released. Marco looked at Salvatore. Play it. Renzo's dead voice filled the room. Weak, raspy, but unmistakable. My name is Renzo Carbone. I'm making this because I'm dying anyway, and there are things worse than hell when you've already spent 20 years living in one. Nobody moved. Renzo described the night Antonio Vitale died. The route, the Genoa meeting, the security change, Salvatore paying him to alter a vehicle assignment. Salvatore telling the Genoas which bridge Antonio would cross. Then came the sentence that changed the room. Sal said Antonio had gotten weak after Maria died. Said the family needed a man willing to cut off whatever hurt before it spread. He said the son was young enough to control. If Marco died too, fine. If not, he'd teach the kid fear and call it loyalty. Marco watched Dominic Greco slowly turn toward Salvatore. Renzo continued. Names, accounts, dates, details too precise to dismiss. Then, I helped him. That's mine to carry. But Salvatore De Luca killed Antonio Vitale and spent every day after calling himself the man who saved the family. The recording ended. Nobody spoke. Evelyn opened her briefcase. Bank transfers, copies of route sheets, and correspondence are available for inspection. Salvatore looked around the table. Marco knew the exact moment he understood he had lost. Not when Renzo named him. Not when the documents appeared. When Dominic Greco pushed the photographs of Jenna away from himself, as if they had suddenly become irrelevant. Salvatore had built the meeting around Marco's supposed betrayal. Now every man at the table was calculating a different betrayal. Antonio Vitale had been their boss. Salvatore had sold him. Renzo had died hours before his confession activated. Forgery, Salvatore said. No one answered. Renzo was drunk for 15 years. Dominic said quietly. Drunks still know who paid them. You believe this? I believe the dates. Another capo picked up one of the documents. I remember this route change. Salvatore looked at Marco. Hatred stripped the last elegance from his face. You think she made you strong? Marco said nothing. That woman has made you sentimental. Maybe. You admitted you'd put her over us. No, I admitted I wouldn't murder her for you. Same thing. Only to a man who cannot understand the difference. Salvatore's hand moved. Marco had imagined this moment for 13 years. In every version, he was the one who killed Salvatore. Gun beneath the table, knife across the throat, hands around the neck. Revenge had been a private room he visited, whenever sleep refused him. But tonight, because Jenna had forced him to do this openly, he was not alone. Salvatore reached inside his coat. 3 capos moved before Marco did. Dominic struck his wrist. Luca overturned the chair. Another man pinned Salvatore's arm against the table. The gun hit the floor and spun beneath the hanging light. Marco did not touch it. Salvatore fought once, violently, then stopped. His face pressed against the scarred wood. He looked at Marco. Coward. Marco stood. Maybe once. You let other men do what your father would have done himself. That's why my father is dead. Salvatore laughed against the table. You think this makes you different? Yes. You think she'll love you clean? Marco's face hardened. I have never been clean. She'll learn. She already knows. Salvatore stared at him. That, more than the recording, seemed to defeat something inside him. Marco had no hidden shame for Salvatore to expose to Jenna. She knew who he was. She simply demanded that he choose what came next. Dominic looked at Marco. What do you want done? Every old instinct answered immediately. Kill him. Marco saw his father's body in a morgue. Saw himself at 19 with blood running through his eyebrow. Saw Renzo floating in black water. Then he saw Jenna. You carry it. Not here, Marco said. Salvatore smiled bitterly. Still pretending. No. Marco stepped closer. You spent 13 years telling everyone my father died because he felt too much. The truth is, he died because he trusted you. Those aren't the same thing. Salvatore's eyes burned. And Renzo? You killed him because you were afraid he would speak. Necessary. That word has protected you from yourself for a long time. Marco looked around the room. No war. No retaliation against anyone who worked under Salvatore, unless there is evidence they participated. His legitimate businesses go under audit. Illegal operations freeze until reviewed. Families of anyone uninvolved keep their income. One capo frowned. You're restructuring tonight? I'm preventing panic tonight. Dominic nodded slowly. Marco looked at Salvatore one final time. Take him. He did not watch them remove the man. He had spent half his life imagining Salvatore's end. When it finally arrived, what Marco felt was not satisfaction. It was exhaustion. Luca approached. You won. Marco looked at the old wooden table. No, he's finished. That isn't the same thing. Luca followed his gaze. What now? Marco took out his phone. 6 missed calls. 1 from Jenna, several from security. He called her immediately. She answered before the first ring finished. Marco? Hearing her voice nearly broke him. I'm alive. Silence. Then Jenna exhaled. Good. It's done. Salvatore? Finished. Are you hurt? Marco looked at his hands. No. Did you kill him? He understood the real question. No. Another breath. Okay. Jenna. What? He came to the restaurant. I know. Marco closed his eyes. I'm sorry. He wanted me to leave. Marco opened them. What? He offered a deal. I disappear. You keep the family. Everybody supposedly lives happily ever after in his emotionally constipated criminal kingdom. Despite everything, Marco almost laughed. What did you say? No. Of course you did. He admitted enough that I knew he believed every terrible thing he'd done was necessary. Marco leaned against the table. That was always the problem. Where are you? Taylor Street. Come here. Marco looked toward the door. I have things to finish. Are any of them more important than showing me you're actually alive? Marco was quiet. No. Then come here. 40 minutes later, he stood outside Russo's table in the rain. Again, Jenna saw him through the window. This time, she unlocked the door before he knocked. Marco entered slowly. Blood marked one cuff. Jenna's eyes went immediately to it. Yours. No. Salvatore? Some. She looked at his face. Tell me. So Marco did. He told her everything. Salvatore's speech, the photographs, Marco's refusal to call her expendable, Renzo's recording, the room turning, Salvatore reaching for the gun, the capos stopping him. Jenna listened without interrupting. When Marco finished, he looked suddenly older. Not weak, just tired enough to stop pretending tiredness did not exist. You didn't become him, Jenna said. Marco closed his eyes. No. She stepped forward and put her hands on his face. Then you won. It doesn't feel like winning. Maybe that's a good sign. He opened his eyes. How? Men like Salvatore probably always thought winning was supposed to feel good. Marco stared at her. Then he laughed softly. You should have been consigliere. Pay is probably terrible. Actually, that was a joke. Right. Jenna looked at the blood on his cuff again. Take off the jacket. One eyebrow rose. That is much faster than our usual progression. I'm trying to clean blood off you, idiot. Less romantic. Kitchen. Now. He obeyed. Jenna wet a towel and worked at the stain while Marco sat on a prep table. This may not come out. Burn it. Of course you'd say that. Normal people care about $3,000 suits. 4. Jenna stopped. 4,000? Approximately. I should let Salvatore win retroactively. Marco laughed. The sound dissolved some final knot inside the room. Jenna set down the towel. Marco's expression softened. He asked whether you'd love me clean. What? Salvatore. At the end, Jenna waited. I told him I'd never been clean and you already knew. Correct answer. I don't know what happens now. Neither do I. That scares me more than tonight did. Good. You enjoy my fear. Only educational fear. Marco reached for her waist and stopped automatically. Jenna noticed. Even now, even after everything, she stepped between his knees and placed his hands on her hips herself. You can touch me. Marco looked up at her. I know. Then why are you waiting? Habit. Keep the habit. She kissed him. Months later, Jenna would remember that kiss more clearly than the first. The first kiss had been possibility. This one was choice. Marco had walked into the room Salvatore designed for him and refused to become the version of himself that fear demanded. That did not erase his past. It did not absolve him. It simply proved that change could exist alongside consequence. The weeks after Salvatore fell were not peaceful. Jenna discovered that removing a traitor from a criminal organization produced approximately the same amount of paperwork as opening a restaurant, except the paperwork occasionally involved federal attorneys and men with nicknames like Frankie Knuckles. Marco worked 18-hour days. Some capos tested him. Others expected retaliation. Rival organizations watched for weakness. Salvatore's businesses had to be untangled from legitimate operations. Marco came to Jenna's apartment one night, dropped onto her sofa, and fell asleep before removing his shoes. She stood over him for a moment, looking at the man half of Chicago supposedly feared. His mouth was slightly open. One sock had a hole near the heel. Jenna took a photograph. She showed it to him the next morning. Marco stared in horror. Delete that. Never. Jenna. Insurance. Against what? You getting too powerful. He reached for her phone. She ran. Marco chased her around the kitchen table until both were laughing too hard to continue. Ordinary moments began accumulating between extraordinary ones. That was how love actually arrived. Not as a thunderclap, as evidence. Marco learned Jenna hated being spoken to before coffee. Jenna learned Marco read history when he could not sleep. He learned she kept emergency chocolate hidden behind flour because Denise stole anything labeled normally. She learned he was terrified of hospitals after watching his mother die. He learned she cried at animal rescue videos and denied it. She learned he tipped servers outrageously because his mother had once worked as a waitress before marrying his father. They fought too. Real fights. The worst came 3 months after Salvatore's fall, when Marco quietly bought the building containing Jenna's planned second restaurant after discovering the landlord intended to sell. Jenna found out from an attorney. She stormed into Marco's office holding the documents. We talked about this. Marco looked up and immediately knew. I can explain. You bought my building. The owner was selling to a development group. So? They intended to terminate commercial leases and convert the property. Then you tell me. There wasn't time. There is always time to ask before purchasing the ground under someone's business. Marco stood. If I had waited 48 hours, you would have lost the location. Then I lose it. After a year of work? Yes. Marco stared at her. Jenna threw the papers onto his desk. You still don't understand. I protected your investment. By becoming my landlord, I transferred the property into an independent trust that you funded. Yes, you made a decision about my life because you believed your solution was objectively correct. Marco's mouth opened, then closed. Jenna saw the exact moment he understood. Damn it. Yes, I did it again. Yes. Marco sat slowly. I'm sorry. Good. What do you want me to do? Jenna folded her arms. Sell it. To whom? Me. Marco looked up. Jenna. At market price. That building is. I know what it costs. You would need financing. Then I get financing. Interest rates are terrible. Marco. He stopped. Jenna continued. If you want to help, you can introduce me to 3 banks, and then walk away. I choose. I negotiate. I sign. Marco leaned back. You're going to pay considerably more than you would if I simply... Jenna raised one eyebrow. 3 banks, he said. And? Then I walk away. Good. 2 months later, Jenna bought the building herself. Marco attended the closing because she invited him. When she signed the final document, she looked at him. See? I see. What do you see? Marco smiled. A woman who enjoys paying unnecessary interest to prove a philosophical point. Jenna kicked him under the table. The second restaurant opened the following spring. Russo North. Jenna refused Marco's suggestion that she name it anything more elegant. People know Russo. People know North. Exactly. The opening night sold out. Jenna stood in the kitchen before service watching her team move through prep and felt something inside her settle. This was hers. Not because a mysterious foundation saved her. Not because Marco cleared obstacles. Not because powerful men made calls. Hers. She had taken the opportunities life gave her, including money whose source she wished had been different, and converted them into years of labor no one could purchase for her. Marco arrived after service. He waited until the last customer left. Jenna found him standing beneath the restaurant sign. Well, she asked, I have a complaint. Leave. The carbonara is missing cream. I will stab you. There she is. He handed her a small box. Jenna narrowed her eyes. We have rules. Open it before prosecuting. Inside was not jewelry. It was the original Aldrich Foundation plaque from her first restaurant. Jenna had removed it months earlier and placed it in storage. Beneath it lay a new brass plate. Jenna Russo Culinary Scholarship Fund. Jenna looked up. What is this? An idea. Not a gift yet. Marco emphasized the final word. The old foundation was a lie. I thought maybe we replace it with something real. You control it. You choose the board. You choose the students. I provide initial funding only if you want me to. Jenna stared at the plate. How much? Whatever amount you approve. And your name? Nowhere. Why? Marco looked at the old plaque. Because I finally understand the difference between helping someone and needing to be part of their story. Jenna's throat tightened. You thought about this. Painfully. Good. I was told carrying things builds character. Jenna smiled. Smart woman. Terrifying woman. Jenna touched the new plaque. We do it. Marco blinked. Yes? Yes. But my board. Transparent accounts. Applicants know where the money comes from. Agreed. And you sit on the board. Marco frowned. You just said my name. I said transparent. No fake foundations. If your money helps someone, you stand behind it honestly. No secret guilt gifts. Marco considered that. All right. And the students owe us nothing. Nothing. Not gratitude. Not loyalty. Not publicity. Nothing, Marco repeated. Jenna nodded. Then we do it. The first scholarship went 6 months later, to a 19-year-old line cook from Cicero named Elena Martinez, who could identify spices blindfolded, but had never eaten inside a restaurant, where entrees cost more than 20 yen, $2. Jenna called her personally. Elena cried. After the call, Jenna sat alone in her office for several minutes, looking at the torn Aldrich letter she had eventually taped back together. For the first time, she did not feel anger when she saw it. She understood something she had not been ready to understand before. Marco's money had helped her. That could be true. Marco's cruelty had hurt her. That could also be true. One truth did not cancel the other. Healing did not require simplifying the past into heroes and villains. Sometimes the person who hurt you regretted it. Sometimes regret mattered. Sometimes it did not matter enough. Sometimes forgiveness was not forgetting or absolving, but deciding that the person standing before you today had earned a relationship with the person you had become. Jenna folded the letter and returned it to the drawer. She did not throw it away again. Marco's transformation outside their relationship moved more slowly. He could not simply announce that the Vitali organization was legitimate now and expect generations of crime to disappear. Jenna never asked him to lie about that. Some businesses could be cleaned quickly. Restaurants, warehouses, construction companies, property management. Others required years of disentangling. Gambling operations were shut down or sold. Predatory loans disappeared first because Jenna hated them, and, more importantly, Marco had come to hate what they represented. Men who had spent 20 years collecting debts needed legal jobs. Marco moved them into security, logistics, construction. Some left. Some resisted. One capo challenged him openly. Marco won without bloodshed, though Jenna suspected the full story was less tidy than he told her. "Did anyone die?" she asked. "No." "Did anyone need a dentist?" Marco hesitated. "Possibly." "Progress. Your standards for rehabilitation are surprisingly flexible." "I run kitchens. I'm realistic." Years passed not in a montage of perfection, but in the accumulation of choices. Marco still woke from nightmares. Jenna still occasionally heard teenage laughter when someone stared too long at her body. Once, at a charity gala, a drunk businessman made a joke about Jenna's size within Marco's hearing. The entire room went silent because everyone knew who Marco was. Marco's face became terrifying. Jenna placed one hand on his arm. "I've got this." Marco looked at her, then stepped back. Jenna smiled at the businessman. "You're Thomas Whitaker, right?" He swallowed. "Yes." "Your company wants catering for the December fundraiser." "Yes." "Not anymore." She walked away. Marco followed. In the hallway he said, "I could ruin him." "I know. Financially." "Still no." "Just a little?" Jenna laughed. "You're learning." "Slowly." That's the point. The strangest moment came almost 3 years after they met again. Jenna returned home and found a framed picture leaning against the living room wall. She recognized it before she crossed the room. The cartoon, the original cafeteria drawing, her teenage body distorted into a joke, the broken chair, the stupid earthquake warning across the top. Jenna stopped breathing. Marco appeared in the doorway. His face changed immediately. "I should have asked." "Where did you get this?" Danny Bellini kept it. "For 17 years? Apparently he thought it was funny memorabilia." Marco's voice contained enough ice to freeze the lake. "He doesn't anymore." Jenna looked at him sharply. "What did you do?" "Bought it." "For how much?" "More than paper should cost." "Marco." "No violence." "Good." She looked back at the drawing. "Why?" "I thought I should keep it." Jenna's stomach tightened. "As punishment?" "Maybe at first." He walked closer but stopped several feet away. "Then I realized punishment was another transaction. Hurt enough, feel guilty enough. Maybe the debt closes." Jenna looked at him. "It doesn't." "I remember." Marco studied the drawing. "I thought I'd hang it in my office. Not where anyone else sees it, just where I do." "Why?" "Because some days I'm going to convince myself I've changed enough, that the boy who drew it no longer matters." His eyes met hers. "He matters. You told me to carry it." Jenna looked at the cruel lines on the paper. For years, she had imagined destroying that drawing if she ever found it, burning it, tearing it into pieces. But now, standing in the home she shared with Marco, she felt something unexpected. Sadness. Not for herself alone, for 2 stupid, frightened teenagers who had understood nothing about what their choices would become. "Don't put it in your office," she said. Marco's brow furrowed. "Where?" "Here." "Jenna, here." She pointed toward the wall. "If we're carrying it, we don't hide it. You shouldn't have to look at it." "I'm not afraid of it anymore." Marco stared at her. "Are you sure?" Jenna picked up the frame. "That girl deserves witnesses too." Marco's face broke, not dramatically, just enough. His eyes lowered. Jenna hung the picture herself. It remained on that wall for the rest of their lives. They married the following autumn. Marco proposed in the least Marco Vitale way imaginable. No diamonds hidden in champagne, no private island, no restaurant closed for the night. Jenna came home on a Tuesday and found him attempting carbonara. "Why is there cream on my counter?" she demanded. Marco looked guilty. "Tradition. Get out of my kitchen." "Technically, this is our kitchen." "Not anymore." He laughed and turned off the stove. Then, without music or candles or bodyguards or elaborate speeches, he reached into his pocket. Jenna stared. "No." Marco froze. "No? If you get on one knee beside that carbonara, I will never forgive you." Marco looked at the pan. "Fair." He moved it into the sink. "Better?" "Marginally." He held the ring but did not offer it yet. "Jenna Russo, I have rehearsed this speech 17 times. That's already too many. And you have ruined all 17. Excellent." Marco smiled. Then the smile faded into something vulnerable. You once told me there was no receipt, that I would carry what I did forever. Jenna nodded. I will. His voice was quiet. I'm not asking you to erase anything. I'm not asking you to tell me I became a good man, because I'm still not sure what that means for someone with my history. He took a breath. I'm asking whether I can keep carrying it beside you. Jenna's eyes burned. That's your proposal? The shorter version is marry me. Much better. Is that a yes? You haven't asked properly. Marco stared. Jenna waited. He laughed nervously, something she had never seen him do. Jenna Russo, will you marry me? Yes. He exhaled, as though he had been underwater. Then Jenna pointed toward the sink. But we need to discuss the carbonara before setting a date. They married inside Russo table on a dead Tuesday in October. 42 guests. No press, no cathedral, no mafia spectacle. Jenna cooked part of the dinner herself because everyone who told her brides were not supposed to cook received the same answer. Then they shouldn't marry chefs. Denise stood beside her in the kitchen, wearing a formal dress beneath an apron, and complaining that Jenna had turned her own wedding into service. Marco was forbidden from entering until dessert. Naturally, he entered anyway. Out, Jenna said. I own half this building. No, you don't. Right, we had that fight. Denise laughed so hard she nearly dropped a tray. Marco kissed Jenna's cheek and left. For dessert, Jenna allowed him to make one tiny portion of his terrible carbonara as a joke course. Every guest received 3 noodles. Dominic Greco took one bite and looked genuinely frightened. Boss, he whispered, with respect, this may be the worst thing you've ever done. Jenna had to leave the room because she was laughing too hard. Later, after everyone went home, she and Marco stood alone in the restaurant. The herb garden outside had grown completely out of control. Thyme crawled over one planter. Rosemary reached almost to the window. Lemon balm had invaded everything because Jenna had ignored Denise's warning that it would. Marco loosened his tie. Jenna removed her shoes. Mrs. Vitale, he said experimentally. Jenna looked at him. Don't push it. Chef Vitale. Worse. Mrs. Russo. Vitale. I kept Russo. I know. I'm exploring. Jenna smiled. Marco. Yes? Thank you. His expression became careful. For what? She looked around the restaurant. Not for saving me. Marco nodded. I know. I need you to know that. I do. I saved myself. You did. Before you came back. Yes. Jenna looked toward the framed Aldrich letter now displayed in her office beside the first scholarship photograph. The money helped. I won't pretend it didn't. But I dug myself out. Marco stepped closer. You did. You didn't fill the hole. No. Jenna took his hand. But you spent a lot of years making sure nobody pushed me back into it. Marco's eyes softened. That I can accept. They walked outside. The night smelled of rosemary and wet pavement. Chicago moved around them, indifferent and alive. Marco's empire had become something different by then. Not clean in the fairy tale sense. History does not bleach because a man falls in love. There were old debts, old enemies, things Marco would carry that Jenna would never completely understand, and some she understood but would never approve of. He did not ask her to approve. He simply stopped lying about the distance between who he had been and who he wanted to become. Over the next decade, Vital Holdings became increasingly legitimate. Construction, hospitality, logistics, property, restaurants. The illegal revenue shrank year by year until it became the exception instead of the foundation. Men once known as soldiers became foremen, managers, security consultants. Some laughed at the transformation. Others discovered health insurance, and predictable paychecks were surprisingly persuasive. Marco used to joke that Jenna had done what federal prosecutors could not. I did nothing, she would say. You threatened me with disappointment. Terrifying weapon. Worked. The scholarship fund expanded. 1 student became 5. 5 became 12. Jenna mentored many herself. Marco attended ceremonies, but never gave speeches unless invited. He learned to stand at the back. He learned that generosity did not require ownership. He learned that sometimes the best thing a powerful man could do was make resources available and then get out of the way. Jenna's restaurants grew too. 2 became 3. She finally won the James Beard Award that had eluded her. When her name was announced, she sat frozen for a full second before Denise screamed and nearly tackled her. Marco stood beside them applauding, tears visible in his eyes. On stage, Jenna looked at the medal and thought about 15-year-old Jenna in the bathroom stall. She did not mention Marco in her acceptance speech until near the end. "There are people who hurt us," she said, "and there are people who help us. And sometimes life is complicated enough that they can be the same person. But nobody else gets to own your healing. That work belongs to you." Marco lowered his head. Jenna continued, "And when somebody genuinely changes, you are not required to forgive them. But if you choose to, forgiveness does not mean the past becomes good. It means the past stops being the only thing allowed to speak." She looked toward him. "I'm grateful for the people in my life who learned how to listen after they spent too long speaking for me." Afterward, Marco found her backstage. "You made me cry in public." "Good." There were cameras. Even better. Salvatore would be disgusted. Jenna touched the scar through his eyebrow. "Then we're definitely doing something right." Years later, on a quiet Sunday morning, Jenna found Marco standing in front of the framed cartoon. His hair had begun graying at the temples. The scar remained. Some things did. He stared at the drawing. Jenna approached from behind. "Where'd you go?" she asked. "Cafeteria." She slipped her hand into his. "Bad neighborhood. Terrible. Want company?" Marco looked at her. "Always." They stood together. "Do you ever wish I'd thrown it away?" he asked. Jenna considered. "No." "Why?" "Because I used to think that girl was pathetic." Marco's face tightened. "She wasn't. I know that now, but for years I hated remembering her. I hated how easily she cried, how much she wanted people to like her, how much power she gave everyone." Jenna touched the frame. "Now I look at her and think she was 15. That's all. 15, and hurting, and doing the best she could." Marco swallowed. "I wish I could tell her I'm sorry." "You can't." "I know. That's part of carrying it." "I know." Jenna smiled. "Still annoying when you say that." 17 years of practice. She leaned against him. Outside, the herb garden had become ridiculous. Rosemary bushes large enough to qualify as landscaping. Thyme creeping between stones. Lemon balm waging territorial warfare against everything nearby. Marco had once offered to hire a gardener. Jenna had refused. "I like it wild." He had never asked again. "You know what's funny?" Jenna said. "What?" "When I was 15, I thought the worst thing that could happen was everyone seeing me." Marco looked at her. "And now?" She smiled toward the windows, toward the restaurants carrying her name, the scholarship students who sent photographs from kitchens around the country, the life she had constructed in full view of everyone. "Now I think disappearing would have been worse." Marco lifted her hand and kissed it. "You were always worth seeing." Jenna looked at him. "Careful." "What?" "That sounds dangerously close to rewriting history." Marco nodded. "Right." He tried again. "I should have seen you better." "Better?" "Much." They walked into the garden. The framed drawing remained behind them. Neither needed to destroy it. Neither needed to worship it. It was simply evidence. Evidence of harm. Evidence of survival. Evidence that redemption was not a magical transformation from villain into hero, but the accumulation of thousands of choices made after someone finally understood the weight of what they had done. Marco Vitali never paid his debt to Jenna Russo. That was the lesson. There was no amount large enough. No scholarship, mansion, protection, wedding ring, or lifetime of good behavior, capable of reaching backward through time and removing a 15-year-old girl from a bathroom stall. So he stopped trying to pay it. He carried it. And Jenna never allowed his guilt to become the author of her life. She had built herself before he returned. She had learned to inhabit her body without apology, learned that food could be love rather than punishment, learned that taking up space was not a crime requiring forgiveness. Loving Marco did not complete her. It was simply one choice made by a woman who had become free enough to choose without shame. Maybe that was why they lasted. He did not rescue her. She did not purify him. They met somewhere more difficult and more honest. He learned that love was not weakness, because real love required him to surrender control without surrendering responsibility. She learned that forgiveness, when freely chosen, did not invalidate anger or erase scars. It merely allowed a person to decide whether scars were walls or history. One autumn evening, many years after the night, Marco first walked into her catering kitchen and whispered her name like a ghost had returned. Jenna stood behind the counter at Russo table, preparing dinner after closing. Marco sat in his usual corner seat. "Taste," she said, sliding a fork toward him. He took a bite, chewed thoughtfully. Jenna waited. "Needs salt." She stared at him. Marco kept his expression perfectly serious. "Get out. I live with you. Not anymore. We're married. Temporary administrative error." He laughed. Jenna tasted the sauce. It did not need salt. She threw a towel at him. Marco caught it. "You're impossible. You married me." Moment of weakness. Marco smiled. "Salvatore warned you about those." Jenna's smile softened. He was wrong. About many things. About the important one. Marco looked at her. Jenna came around the counter and stood between his knees. "Feeling something didn't make you weak." "No, being afraid of feeling it did." Marco's hands settled around her waist. Even after all these years, there was sometimes the faintest pause before he touched her. A habit so deeply learned that it had become part of the language between them. Jenna noticed. She always noticed. "You can touch me," she whispered. Marco smiled. "I know." Outside, the city continued without them. Somewhere, a young culinary student opened an email, informing her that tuition would be covered. Somewhere, one of Marco's former soldiers clocked out of a legitimate warehouse job and drove home to his children. Somewhere, an old enemy probably still cursed the Vitali name. Life did not become clean. It became chosen. Jenna looked across the restaurant toward the herb garden, wild behind the glass. She remembered telling Mrs. Kowalski about it when she was 15. "Someday," she had said. "Someday I'll have a kitchen where nobody can tell me I don't belong." Marco had remembered the herbs, but he had misunderstood the dream. The dream had never really been rosemary or thyme. It had been ownership, space, a door Jenna could open or close herself, a place where nobody else decided whether she was too much. Now her name was above that door. Marco understood finally that the most loving thing he could do was not give her the dream. It was stand beside her while she owned it. "What?" he asked, noticing her stare. "Nothing. That look is never nothing." Jenna touched the scar across his eyebrow. "Just thinking about the first night." "At the mansion? You looked terrified." "I was." "Good. You really enjoy that detail." "Very much." Marco smiled. "You corrected me. You called me Jenna." "You said Chef Russo." "Damn right. I remember thinking you had become exactly the person I always knew you could be." Jenna raised an eyebrow. "Dangerous sentence." Marco corrected himself immediately. "Exactly the person you chose to become. Better. I'm still learning. Forever." Marco looked toward the old drawing on the far wall, then back at her. "Forever." Jenna kissed him. And somewhere deep inside her memory, the cafeteria finally went quiet. Not because the laughter had never happened. Not because Marco's love traveled backward and saved the girl sitting alone in that bathroom stall. It went quiet because the woman Jenna became no longer needed to answer it. She had nothing left to prove to those voices. She had a restaurant full of laughter that did not hurt, a body she no longer treated like an apology, a career built with her own hands, a garden growing far beyond the boundaries intended for it. And beside her stood a man who had once taught her what cruelty tasted like, and then spent the rest of his life learning, without shortcuts and without receipts, how to feed something better. The ledger never closed. It simply stopped being a prison.